Hi everyone and welcome. Today I'm going to be speaking about this upcoming partial lunar eclipse in the sign of Sagittarius, which is basically a full moon which takes place very close to the nodal axis, and that's why from an astrological perspective we consider it a lunar eclipse. Now, a lunar eclipse is basically like a very strong and very karmic full moon, so it favors mostly massive karmic completions. It favors certain type of endings. It can also represent a moment in time when we are mature enough in one area of our lives, especially where the eclipse takes place, and then because we have all that maturity, we can make certain options, we can take certain actions. But at the same time, like every full moon, it is also very powerful revelatory energy because the moon is also a luminary body. So the sun uh, illuminates the moon from the sign of Gemini because a full moon is the opposition of the sun and the moon. So the moon is going to reveal some very important things that have to do with the sign of Sagittarius basically, and a lot of things that Sagittarius rules are very important elements to our present moment condition, most importantly globally, because the sign of Sagittarius has so much to do with travels, especially long distance travels, flights, international travels, international, but also national law, legislation, rules and regulations, trials, the justice system. It has also very much to do with our own life philosophies, with our worldview, with our inner truth, and of course with religion, with dogma, with organized spirituality, so to speak, with mainstream religions, the church, and all of that. But of course, it also has a very scientific aspect to it because the highest expression of Sagittarius is like certain domains of science where, mathematics, but philosophy, theories, a basic non-linear logic of the mind has to be applied. For example, quantum physics, cosmology, the evolution of law and morality in a legal perspective have all much to do with the sign of Sagittarius. And also, in the modern era, space travel, like rocket launching, space exploration, sending probes throughout the solar system, and all of this is also closely related to the sign of Sagittarius because we as a human collective have evolved, and these activities fall in the category of what Sagittarius rules. So basically, this can represent a completion or shedding light on any of the above mentioned symbolism. It has to do with the sign of Sagittarius. Moons have also this effect and power to reveal secrets, to shed light on things which were either, for example, hidden from our sight, or maybe we just simply weren't aware of them. So an eclipse is that much relevant, that much stronger, that much more revelatory. So chances are that at the time of this eclipse, which is taking place on the 5th of June, at approximately 15 degrees of the sign of Sagittarius. So as I was saying, if a full moon has in itself a very revelatory energy to it, well then an eclipse is that much more stronger, that much more impactful. And full moons are usually very emotional periods. So whatever is going to reach our awareness, especially collectively, is definitely going to be leaving a very profound emotional impact on us. It is definitely going to stir our feelings because the moon from the sign of Sagittarius isn't just opposing the sun in Gemini, but also Venus in Gemini. The sun and Venus are going to be conjunct, dancing together very closely in the sky around the time of this eclipse, But of course, their conjunction isn't perfect, it isn't exact, but it is still close enough that we can consider it an opposition. So Venus basically is an active part of this eclipse, and Venus has everything to do with matters of the heart, our feelings, our love, and since she is also retrograde at the time of this eclipse, well, that means that we are that much more receptive, susceptible to be triggered emotionally. So, whatever the light of this eclipse, of this full moon, is going to be revealing in our lives, well, chances are that it's going to matter very, very much emotionally, and it might even have to do with our future plans, with whatever we wish to accomplish in the next 18 months, because this eclipse, this full moon phenomenon, is happening relatively close to the nodal axis, and the nodal axis is our karmic path, our collective karmic path. It has much to do with whatever we have to accomplish, well, both individually and collectively, in the next 18 months of our lives. So if this eclipse is a flow of information, of revelation, of discovering the truth, well, then that truth, that information, whatever is going to be revealed, is going to be very, very important and impactful regarding our futures. But it can also be like a massive wake up call where we all of a sudden, in a flash of a moment, we all of us collectively get disillusioned. We lose a certain type of illusion, a certain type of, for example, ignorance or wishful thinking, or it can very, very well play out as the fact that we have been manipulated, that we have been led blindly by certain people or by centralized power. That is a big possibility. Well, because this full moon, this eclipse, is predominated by two very powerful and very hard squares. Because the full moon is going to be speaking in conversations of tension, both with Mars, and the conversation of tension with Mars is very tight, so it is not just a subtle energy, it is there all the way. And Mars is basically, the god of war. Yes, it's absolutely not as powerful, not as aggressive, not as fiery in this part of the sky, Pisces, where it communicates from. But Mars is still a planet of action, a planet which has much to do with wars, assertion, anger, maybe for some people frustration. So it is very, very action oriented. And in the sign of Pisces, well, chances are that that action is going to be emotional, it is going to be maybe spiritual, but at the same time, it can also represent a massive influence where we use our knowledge, where we use our Piscean energies, for example, and influence other people in a certain way. And also, the ancients considered Mars to be the lower malefic, and malefic represents that it always brings conflict, it always brings strife, crisis, confrontations, tension basically. So whatever is going to be revealed to us, it is definitely going to have elements of tension, elements of confrontations, elements of assertion, or it can leave a very shocking impact on us emotionally. But of course, if this wasn't enough, the full moon is also going to be speaking in the same time of conversation, square with Neptune from its home sign of Pisces, and this is where we have a very, very strong and extremely potent Neptune. And the negative expression of Neptune is illusion, it is lies, it is deception, it is where we see or think and feel what we want to feel and not reality, not the objective truth. It can be a touch of fantasy, it can be dreams, it can be, altered states of consciousness, escapism, addictions. But my personal opinion that regarding this specific moment in time, the full moon in Sagittarius, Neptune is going to represent a very mixed energy where it's going to contain a lot of spiritual and inner and moral truths, but a lot of fake information, lies, and deception. And this amalgam, this mixture of lies and truth, of deception and clarity, is going to be flooding over us because the sun is in the sign of Gemini, and it has so much to do with communication, with the internet, and even official communication, like for example the official news, the official position and communication of the government and centralized power, of the scientific community, of the World Health Organization, for example. So whatever news, communication, or information that is going to be heading our way, as in our way, here I mean the collective, the citizens, us, it's going to be very, very dual, as in there's going to be a lot of truth in it, but a lot of manipulation, a lot of lies, a lot of deception, a lot of, psychological techniques to either add a coat of honey onto everything or to add, a coat of seriousness where they might want to trigger a fear reaction from all of us. And of course, at the same time, Mars is also going to be speaking in a square with Venus. So that means that our feelings, however we are going to be feeling, is going to be seriously triggered. It is going to be stirred up, and it is going to cast us in a aura of confusion. This is where Mars is very action oriented, so the confusion is not going to be lasting for very long. It's only gonna last for a little bit, because Mars is a very action oriented planet, and that represents that feeling confused or seeing the deception, seeing the lies, knowing 1,000,000% that we cannot trust any information, we cannot give credibility to anything. That is going to motivate us, that is going to basically activate our warrior spirits, because that is all Mars, that is a very Martian energy, to dig deep within ourselves and see which version of events we align with. And if we don't align with anything, well then it's not going to hurt us. It's not going to, disempower us, quite the contrary. This is where a state of not being very clear what to believe or not is definitely going to make us be our most assertive and take no BS kind of version. So we are definitely going to demand answers. We are going to demand clarity. We are going to be challenging in one way or another any type of manipulation tendency, any type of I don't know, we are not sure, we are not certain, the scientists haven't spoken yet. If all of this comes from official sources, this is where people are going to be quite angry, and their anger is going to be very justified because very big truths are going to see daylight. But parallel to this, deceptions, lies, and manipulations are going to come hand in hand with the truth. This will definitely anger people. So this eclipse can play out in a number of different ways on the world stage, where, as I said earlier, it has so much to do with legislation, international law, court cases, and stuff like that. So we can see a massive completion of a trial or a big legislative initiative or something like that playing out on the world stage, affecting the international community. So for example, we, all of us, especially those people who are responsible for legislation, are going to 1,000,000% without even a shadow of doubt know the urgent necessity to upgrade, for example, the rules and regulations which govern international travel, flights, tourism, long distance travels in all its shape and form. So this is going to be a massive subject that will require urgent resolution, and the resolution may not be very accepted by everyone equally. It can trigger a lot of controversy, it can trigger a lot of legal battles, But at the same time, this, Sagittarius is also our faith. It is also our inner truth, basically. So dogmatism, rigid faith is definitely going to be challenged. Institutions which have to do with faith and spirituality, for example, churches and organized religion, now they're going to have a lot of challenges. Maybe some shocking truth is going to be revealed of what's going on in their institutions, inside of their, you know, patriarchy, basically. And this, Mars, the square with Mars, this can also represent inner battles between the church, information, news, truth being exposed from within this church. And Venus in Gemini, this full moon opposes Venus in Gemini. So this can be, for example, corruption. This can be like sexual scandals, pedophilia, and all of that. Because Venus is retrograde, and this is the energy of a truth being exposed. So it can very much be related to anything like this. It can also trigger like controversy about certain type of technologies, for example 5G, or that Starlink, or however you call it, the Tesla stuff being installed, the new satellite system, space travel, and all of that. It can also represent very shocking and big scientific discoveries. It can also represent moral and, spiritual discussions about the morality or the ethics of certain sciences that can also have to do with the sign of Sagittarius. And this is where the way we are going to be traveling by air, by plane, is definitely going to see a massive upgrade. It may not be exactly at the time of this full moon, but it will definitely be a big moment leading to a completion or a resolution or an upgrade in legislation, especially travels and air traffic. But another very unfavorable expression of this energy, it can be something very, very shocking, because Mars is definitely the planet of war. So this can mean an extreme gesture, for example like a terrorist attack, or something done in the name of faith and spirituality, a very extreme or assertive gesture that can shock the whole world, basically. So enters into our sphere of awareness, it is going to be definitely shocking. It is going to be moving us emotionally. It is going to strike a nerve, so to speak, especially which has to do with our emotions, matters of the heart, our, morality, and all the moral values that we hold dear. Venus in Gemini, it doesn't have to be like passionate love. It can just be a moral value that we respect very, very much. So all of this is going to be challenged. There is going to be a lot of psychological, mediatic, informational warfare. And I think in the present moment, the word warfare is the most authentic expression of this energy, because it is going to stir a lot of conflict, a lot of contradiction, like people representing different opinions, different truths, different versions of how things are definitely going to be in massive conflicts with one another, especially on the internet. But to make this even worse, centralized power is going to be one of the power players here. It is going to be one element of this conflict. So it is going to be the one who receives the most challenges, the most dissatisfactions, the most assertive actions. And this is where so much chance here, people to rebel, to uprise, to take to the streets, to express their opinions, to express their sovereign wills, because this is Mars, and this is like a very spiritual Mars. So this is where intellect, rationality is not going to be a very soothing factor here, because people are definitely not going to be rational. Mars and Pisces, it is all about emotions, but it's not even those emotions that we are fully aware of, but it's more like what is inside of us in our subconscious, what is running in the background of our minds. So that is the nerve that is going to be hit. And when it's about the unconscious, when it is about the all our repressed emotions and our subconscious programming, and Pisces has much to do with our past traumas, our past disadvantages, all those things that we couldn't forgive, but even those which we have forgiven, but the memory is still there. So if the information that we are being bombarded with by centralized power, by official sources of communication, and anyone else basically, if that information strikes our subconscious nerve, basically, our emotional worlds, well, that is when the waters of Pisces, the Neptunian waters, are going to be boiling with rage, and there's gonna be no forgiveness, no rational approach. What is inside of us is going to burst out, and people are definitely going to be taking action. And to make this even more assertive, if that is even possible, Mars is Aries, the god of war at the Greeks. And Aries has a sister, Eris. And Eris is the planetoid of discord, and basically she is associated with rebellion, revolution, a rude awakening, a violent way of awakening to truth. And she is in Mars's home sign of Aries, squaring Pluto and Jupiter in the sign of Capricorn. So that means revolution, that means anger, that means the power of the people no longer being able to contain their frustration, their dissatisfaction. So we can all expect some big turmoil to hit the world stage basically around this time. And since Venus is squaring Mars as well, well, that means that if something triggers us emotionally, then I don't think there is any chance that we can hold ourselves back, because when we're fueled by raw emotion, rationality doesn't have that much control over us anymore. And speaking about rationality, during the time of this eclipse, of this full moon, Mercury is in the sign of Cancer, where it is responsible for our emotional intelligence, for our intuition, and this is where we are going to be feeling much more connected and much more, emotionally attached to our loved ones, our friends, everyone that we consider family, everyone who is part of our souls, basically. So this is where we're going to be very, very protective, very nurturing, very loving to those who are part of our lives, and that adds a much greater emotional impact, because Mercury in the sign of Cancer makes us all become aware that much more of our own emotional states, and we have like a honest desire, like an inner calling to protect and do everything that we can for our loved ones, for our local community, for the culture that we belong to. All of that has much to do with the sign of Cancer. So if all of those values are going to be threatened, even just informationally, it's still enough for us to burst, especially because Mercury holds a sextile, a harmonious celestial conversation, with Uranus from the sign of Taurus, and Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury. If Mercury is the mind, the practical mind, then Uranus is the highest mind, our highest cerebral activities, our super intelligence. So whenever these planets speak in a harmonious way with each other, information, epiphanies, insights, sudden realization come in a flash. And at the same time, Uranus in the sign of Taurus, we are going to be that much more aware, that much more in tune with all of our values, with everything that we hold dear, with everything that we love, both emotional, material, any kind of value, because the sign of Taurus has very much to do with our value systems. So this sextile with Uranus, Mercury sextiling Uranus, just adds that much more momentum, impulse, that just makes the volcano, the inner emotional volcano, erupt that suddenly and unexpectedly. It is going to be full of surprises, shocks, yes, even delight for some people, but because there's so many squares in the sky, this is going to be a very heavy but very quick and hasty energy where spirits are going to be sparked instantaneously. And another thing I would like to mention, during this time, Vesta, the keeper of the sacred flame, the symbol of our divine passion basically, is at 0 degrees in the sign of Cancer, and it's going to be conjuncting that North Node in Gemini, because it is an outer sign conjunction, but it is still relevant because our passions, our highest passions, not necessarily, like our animal type of passions, are going to be burning very, very intensely in our hearts to achieve progress, or at least to know that we are doing everything we can to achieve progress, that North Node. So this is also going to add an element of urgency, but perhaps this is maybe the saving grace, because Vesta has a certain gentleness and sacredness to her. Now, individually, this energy can play out in a totally different way, because yes, absolutely, those revelations, those truths, or whatever that is going to be revealed to us on the world stage are going to be affecting us. But equally, those truths and revelations can have absolutely much to do with our own personal lives, depending on where that degree, as in 15 degree of Sagittarius, falls into our own personal chart. So the revelation can have absolutely everything to do with something in our lives personally, which can equally stir us up. But more importantly, Sagittarius is the faith. Sagittarius is our life view, our life philosophy, how we live life. So it can be like a test and challenge of our faith. But this, even though this may feel uncomfortable and it can be a little bit distressful spiritually, it is aligning us with our true expressions of our faith. It is showing us what we need to eliminate from our souls basically, and our higher minds. It shows us where our true faith lies, and that our true faith has to be, Mars squaring the moon, has to be flexible, has to be adaptable. It can never be rigid, it can never be dogmatic. If we believe in a dogma, then we are in the wrong. Then we cannot expect ourselves to evolve with the world, to go with the flow, because aligning ourselves with a rigid dogmatic principle blocks us and shuts us down spiritually. And that's that. For example, many religions promote fear of God. Now, if we align with that, then it doesn't matter how good intended we are still going to be literally doomed for the rest, every single waking moment of our lives. That is a principle, that is a belief that will turn you instantly into a slave, and there's no way out of that. The only way out is to change your belief. But if you see the divine as a slave driver, well, then you're creating that. That is exactly what the divine is going to be for you personally. And it doesn't just have to do with our personal faith and our life philosophy, because Mars in the sign of Pisces is our past, it is our subconscious, it is our deep emotional world. So we can also find very important, very relevant karmic completions to anything that has been left unfinished from the past, distant past. For some people, even from our past lives, for example. Because this is a very, very karmic eclipse. So this is definitely closing a big chapter of our past. Some people, this will require them to, forgive and forget and accept the situation. Just close the door to their past and know that they're no longer the same person, they're no longer that victim, they are no longer suffering the same emotional problems that they have been in the past. While for other people, Mars is a very action-oriented planet. It can represent physical manifestations of event, of fated, triggers of fate, whatever they need in their lives to find closure, to move on, to start living a new chapter in their lives. If all of this requires a physical, a material, a very palpable manifestation of something, that can also take place, that can also happen, because as I said, full moons are manifestation energy within themselves. Well, then eclipse is that much stronger, so bigger manifestations of faith and karma can take place in our lives. And finally, another thing that I would like to add is that during the time of this eclipse, the moon is going to be dancing very, very tightly with the Great Attractor. Now, the Great Attractor is not a planet, but neither is it a fictional point in astrology. It is a spatial anomaly that is traveling through space. It exists. It is a cosmological, as in a scientific phenomenon. We don't know specifically what it is, what produces it, but we know that it is so powerful. It has such a massive gravitational and magnetic pull that it can distort galactic clusters and it can rearrange galaxies. So it is a massive power. It is a massive creational power, which basically is fueling a part of space, a big part of space, galaxies, galactic clusters, with like a cosmic radiation. So it is a big energy source, and all of this is going to conjunct the moon in a very tight conjunction. So when something speaks with the Great Attractor in this type of conversation, well, that planet, that energy receives unlimited cosmic power. It receives like a divine infusion. So this means that this full moon is going to be extremely emotional. Now, if all full moons are rather quite emotional, they pull on our feelings, they pull on the water in our bodies. The most emotional type of full moons are usually the Cancer full moons, the Pisces full moons, Scorpio full moons. But this is so very special because this is with the Great Attractor. So if anything, we are going to be hyper emotional and we're going to be flooded with dreams, premonitions, deja vus, divine downloads. This is going to be a big energy that for those people who have this perception, I mean, every single individual has this perception, just that not everyone knows how to use it. It's not an active part of everyone's lives. But for those who it is, well, then their extrasensory perceptions are going to be on overtime. It's going to be massive. So prepare for visions, prepare for dreams, prepare for divine downloads, so to speak, because it's going to be massive. Well, thank you so much for listening. I wish everyone a blessed and a very magical eclipse. And I would like to just say a word of warning. Doesn't matter how emotional you are. It doesn't matter how much your emotions are going to be triggered. All of us, without exception, need to apply even the rationality of our minds to this. Yes, it's not easy. It's going to be rather disadvantaged, the rational part, but it's an opposition. So we need to ensure the balance. Because otherwise, if we just take to the streets, if we go protest, if we immerse ourselves in violence, well, that is not going to be solving anything. It is just going to be putting us in danger. So we need to be very careful what action and choices we make around this time, because the main purpose is for us to receive greater clarity and completion and closure, to prepare ourselves and not to put our lives into risk for the sake of an emotion. So this is where we need to be really, really self-disciplined, because otherwise, this energy, especially with Aries squaring Pluto, it can really turn us and send us into a rage, and that's not advised. So be very, very diligent, be very, very careful, and just watch the frequency of your thoughts. Don't let it get out of control. Now, of course, there is another element where if you'd happen to have any planet in your personal chart at 15 degrees of Sagittarius conjunct the great attractor, well then it's going to be like stepping into the twilight zone for a couple of days. So if you're someone who has a planet on top of the great attractor, then prepare yourself for the unexpected. Prepare yourself for living like an episode either out of the Twilight Zone or the X-Files in your personal life, because it's going to be very, very unusual and strange. So thank you so much for your trust and for listening. Until next time, bye for now.